Hello and welcome to the Weekend Spectator with Paul and Grace. Thank you for being with us. And today we're going to be breaking down the assassination attempt on President Trump and that of Reagan, and also talking about that on the Pope. So this will be a really interesting episode. I mean, with the craziness that has happened over the past few weeks with the assassination attempt on Trump, there are some really interesting and comparable similarities of that on Reagan. And who better to break that down than the expert himself, Paul Kengor?
Well, thanks, Grace. Good to be with you. And yeah, so in our last episode, we talked about the assassination attempt against Donald Trump in my hometown of Butler, Pennsylvania. And we talked there about how you had been at the previous Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania in 2020. And for people to understand the kind of geography of this, Grace went to Grove City College, graduated there May 2024. I'm a professor there, so we both lived in Grove City. I still live in Grove City. Grove City is maybe a 25-minute drive from the Butler Farm Show grounds. And so I almost went to the rally a few weeks ago in Butler just because I live there. It's my hometown. My 16-year-old son was actually there. And in 2020, he drew just a massive crowd in 2020 and had a really big crowd again this time. I decided not to go, but I watched the whole thing live on TV. My son, unfortunately, watched it live in person. And, his mother and I were really kind of distraught for about 20 minutes before we found out whether or not he was safe. Fortunately, he was. One man died, this poor soul, Corey Comparatori. But it made me, so I have that unique connection, personal connection to that. Now I'm hearing Butler, and then came Butler, Pennsylvania, right? And my hometown now is infamous. But so I have that personal connection to the Trump shooting, which fortunately we call it an assassination attempt and not an assassination. And I also have a very personal connection to well, not quite the same, but to the Reagan shooting on March 30th, 1981, because I'm a Reagan biographer. I've written more books on Ronald Reagan than anybody else.
And an exciting new thing, right? So the Reagan movie is coming out on August 20th, which is based off of your book and your expertise.
Exactly right. And the opening scene of the movie. Now, I saw the movie about 2 years ago. I haven't seen the final cut yet, ironically. So I'll be out in Hollywood for the premiere on August 20th. But when I saw the cut about 2 years ago, it opens with the John Voight character, Victor, the KGB agent, and he's talking about the Crusader, right, Ronald Reagan. And so the movie is based on my book, The Crusader, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of Communism. But it's now been redone. Hey, there you go. All right.
Everyone
So
get the book.
get the book. Get the book. It's been reissued now in paperback by HarperCollins, so it's out again and available. But from what I understand about the movie that has since been revised, the final cut that everybody will see in theaters, I think it premieres nationwide August 30th. And you and I are going to be doing a podcast from the Reagan Ranch Center.
Yeah, that's
The
another thing
movie,
to look forward to. So we'll be talking a lot more about the Reagan movie, and it's starring Dennis Quaid, David Henry, John Voight, as he said, really big movie and I think it's going to be so exciting to see such a big movie like this do so well in the public square, beyond politics, hopefully. So it's a huge movie. We'll be talking about it more on future episodes where you'll actually be there at on site, Reagan Ranch in California. Yeah.
and the relevance to this in our conversation today is that, from what I understand, the movie now opens with the assassination attempt on Reagan, March 30th, 1981. And myself and another of my sons, Mitch, my second son, we were there for the filming in Guthrie, Oklahoma for several days. Boy, I don't remember what, 2022, 2021. And we happened to be there for the assassination attempt, shooting, shooting like camera shooting as well as shooting. And it's that's really quite riveting. But it made me, watching the near death of Trump and all of this, made me think of the Reagan shooting, March 30th, 1981. I was 14 years old when that happened. I wasn't watching it on TV. I don't think anyone was watching it on TV. Reagan that day spoke at 2:25 p.m. at the Washington Hilton to a union audience, AFL-CIO. He comes walking outside through a back door. He's got the Secret Service with him, Jim Brady, his press secretary, local DC police. The reporters yell a question to him. He's walking toward his car. He takes his left hand almost as if to like wave to the reporters and almost brush them off. And John Hinckley, in his early 20s, like the shooter of Donald Trump in his early 20s, loner, outcast, pulls out a handgun with 22 Devastator bullets that kind of explode on impact. And one of the shots actually ricocheted off the presidential limousine and then kind of folded into like a flat razor-shaped, like razor-jagged dime almost, and went underneath Reagan's left armpit. In fact, they didn't even know. So first of all, Reagan is shoved into the back of the limousine by Jerry Parr, the Secret Service agent, and Parr yells at the driver, "Go, go, go!" And then Reagan says, "Jerry, get off of me! I think you've broken one of my ribs." So Parr helps him up, and these like frothy blood bubbles come out from Reagan's lips. And Parr said, "That's not a broken rib, sir. That's a lung puncture. You've been hit." And so Parr said to the driver, "Straight to GW Hospital, George Washington University Hospital right now." So they got there, and Reagan, who was 70 years old, outstanding physical condition. By the way, Grace, this was before you were born, right? But all the liberals said, "Reagan's too old, 70 years old. He's like a dinosaur."
Look at where we are now.
Yeah, exactly. So Reagan's like, "I'm fine," gets out, walks out of the limousine. By the way, Frank Reynolds got on ABC News and said, either that the president hadn't even been hit or he was okay. Nancy Reagan had been told that he was okay. He gets out of the car, starts walking, bam, went right down. They took him inside. They realized he's losing a lot of blood. They got him on the operating table, and the doctor's trying to figure out where's the bullet? Where did it go in? And he got out he got the president's shirt, and he was looking in his shirt, and he noticed like a little slit kind of underneath the armpit. And he said, "Oh, that must be where it is." So they looked into Reagan. They saw that the bullet entry wound went in that way. And the bullet stopped just a few centimeters from his heart. If it had not, he would have hit his heart and he would have bled to death. He would have bled to death. And so Reagan, one of the most moving things I've ever read from any president. Actually, before that, he joked with the surgical team. He said, "I hope you're all Republicans."
I was gonna say that's actually one of my favorite, obviously that it's bad, but favorite stories of Reagan, in the sense of how much it shows his personality and his sense of humor, that even in a time like that, he thought it was appropriate to joke, and he gets
Right,
in the shot and he's cracking jokes in pure Reagan fashion.
yeah. And he would tell Nancy, he'd later say, "Honey, I forgot to duck," which is a famous line from
and that's
Jack Dempsey, I think, boxer.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's obviously his famous line, "Oh, you missed me," whenever the balloon popped in the crowd later. So,
Right, exactly.
so yeah, watch now.
Remains the most compelling argument for an open world. We're reminded of the many traditions of openness and democracy that have marked the history of this city. Missed me.
Yeah, he always had that sense of humor, which is why he's so lovable. I mean, yeah.
So he's laying there, and he wrote this in his memoirs. So he's laying there on the surgical table, looking up at the ceiling. He said, "I looked up at the tiles in that ceiling," and I have this in a quote in a piece I did for the American Spectator. This whole discussion.
Read these pieces. We'll insert them here, but make sure that you read. He wrote a piece for the Crisis magazine, Two Presidents and Two Popes, the Near Assassination Misses, and then also for the American Spectator. Really great pieces.
And he's laying there, and he said, "I looked up and I started counting the tiles in the ceiling, and I thought at that moment that I needed to forgive the confused young man who tried to kill me." Right? This is how charitable Reagan was. Right? He doesn't refer to him as that young creep, that monster, that sicko, that psycho who tried to take my life. This confused young man. And I realized at that moment that I needed to pray for his soul, right? And to ask forgiveness in my heart, which is what he learned from his mother, Nell Reagan, right? Ronnie, you always forgive. You always forgive. Jesus wants us to forgive, Ronnie. You always forgive. And Reagan said in his memoirs, isn't that the message of the lost sheep, right? To go and find this person and bring him back to the flock. And I was later told by the Reverend Louis Evans. Here's another Butler connection. The Reverend Louis Evans was Reagan's pastor at the National Presbyterian Church. And after my first book came out, God and Ronald Reagan, he contacted me and he said, I really appreciated your book and I wanted to tell you something. I later found out, Grace, that Louis Evans was near the end of his life, and this is why he was reaching out to me. And he said, you don't have the account of what I know about that moment. I want to tell you about it. And he told me that when he got to the hospital, Reagan told him that he had this deep spiritual feeling of pressing upon him, that if he did not forgive his shooter at that moment for what he did, that the Lord would take Reagan. So he felt that forgiveness was conditional at this point. Mm-hmm. So he prays for the soul of John Hinckley. And Reagan, of course, survived, but he could have very nearly bled to death. And you compare this, and when Reagan survived, he credited God. He told a bunch of different people, Reverend Billy Graham, his son, Michael Reagan, his daughter, Patty. He told Mother Teresa, Cardinal Terence Cook in New York, right? He said, whatever time I have left is for him, capital H, right? God. And he felt that God saved his life. And Donald Trump now, how many times since that day in Butler, 5, 6 o'clock, whatever it was, that Saturday in Butler, how many times, Grace, has he said already, and including at the Republican National Convention speech, that he felt that God saved his life, that it was providential? Because if he doesn't turn his head this way and the bullet just grazes his ear, if his head is still in this direction, just like Reagan, a few centimeters, he's a dead man.
Less than that, even. I mean, yeah, it was a
Right.
minuscule difference where it, again, the probability that it missed him is crazy, where, yeah, God's hand surely was on him and on Reagan, and it really is amazing. I mean, how close it was for both of them.
In fact, Cardinal Cook said to Reagan, the hand of God was upon you. And Reagan then said, I know, whatever time I have left is for him. And that was Easter Sunday. No, not Easter Sunday, Good Friday, following the assassination attempt, March 30th, 1981. And then a few weeks after that, Reagan had lunch. He and Nancy had lunch with Mother Teresa and another nun from Mother Teresa's Sisters of Charity group. And I think it was June 17th, 1981, maybe. I remember all these dates because I've done so many books on Reagan. But Mother Teresa looked at Ronald Reagan and said, the hand of God was upon you. She said, Mr. Reagan, me and my sisters, we stayed up for 2 days and 2 nights praying for you. And there's a reason for this. You've experienced this suffering, so you can now experience the suffering of the world. And Nancy Reagan had tears in her eyes. She was so touched by it. And Reagan too felt this deeply prayerful moment. But yeah, so to connect this to Donald Trump, Reagan after this point felt a higher calling. He was already committed at this point to wanting to win the Cold War. He famously said to Richard Allen, January 1977, he said, Dick, my policy toward the Soviet Union and the Cold War is this: we win and they lose. What do you think about that? So he's already committed to trying to find a way to take down the Soviet empire. But as Edmund Morris, his biographer, a whole bunch of other people said, when he was shot, it gave him this higher sense of urgency that I might not be here forever. I could go just like that. So I need to right now focus on taking down that evil empire. And in Trump's case, I don't know, whatever Trump is now, maybe it might be more broadly to making America great again, or whatever it is, might be a specific policy objective, or fighting the Russians or something like that. But when Trump walked into that Republican National Convention in Milwaukee that first day, that Monday, just like 48 hours after the shooting, I mean, Grace, you could see it in his face, right? His countenance.
There,
He looked
oh,
like a changed man.
he definitely. I mean, it was a touching and emotional walk-in. First of all, he clearly something changed in him. He's different. I mean, even just watching him throughout the convention, the looks, the facial expressions he was making, he looked at peace. He there's just something about it. I mean, this certainly did change him. And even the remarks that he delivered following the shooting, this is only a few days after it. I mean, the strength that was shown just in this entire thing with how he reacted immediately after the shooting, um, to in such a brave way, really. I mean, who of us would have reacted that way when, I mean, it's just crazy. But following that, to give remarks in, first of all, start by pointing to God, then to pay a beautiful tribute to Corey and his family,
Yeah.
and really his message was just unifying. That's the thing. I think in a sense his message changed, where you can kind of see the change in him, where this is not this it wasn't about politics even. I mean, the talk he gave, it was a unifying and encouraging message of, I'm standing for all of America. I'm not trying to win for half of America. He's over the division. He's just trying to genuinely make America great. And part of it too about Trump that's so interesting and different than other politicians is that it is true that Trump could have an amazing, great life, relaxing at Mar-a-Lago.
Right.
He retire, he could be living it up, but he
That's what he
truly
said in Butler, right? He said, I could be on a beach right now, a
he
beautiful
could
beach
be.
right
But
now.
that shows. I mean, he loves his country so much and he cares so much that he's doing this for the American people. And he's doing this because he wants to preserve America and make it the best that it can be. And there's something to be said for that. I mean, he's sacrificed so much and he's faced so much adversity and hardship, and suffering just through a lot of different things. But the point being with this, I think it further illuminates that he doesn't have to be doing this, but instead he's standing and taking bullets, and I mean that metaphorically also, to be doing what he's doing. And that really does, there's something about that.
When he walked into the Republican convention that Monday in Milwaukee, and I was watching it with my kids, including my son, my 16-year-old son, who was in Butler at the Trump rally when that happened. He's obviously now really interested in presidential politics all of a sudden. But when Trump walked in, I thought he had a look kind of like, I don't know if I even want to be here. I mean, he looked. Now, keep in mind, that's 48 hours after a literal brush with death, right? So at that moment, he's probably, even Trump, as tough as he is probably, even somebody who could yell, fight, 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 right after he's been hit by a bullet, right? He still kind of had a look like, I want to say timid. He's not timid, right? But um, calmer, much more humbled,
It was
right?
kind of
Humbled,
oddly at peace. It was just,
right? And then
yeah.
he sat down and he watched all those speeches that people were giving. I thought he didn't look good. I don't know if it was the camera on him, looked like he was perspiring a lot, which I'm sure he was. And the guy's probably on painkillers. And I was thinking, I wonder if he probably just wants to fall asleep right now. Is he going to be able to stay awake through
Well,
through all
and of
these
course, the
speeches?
left, if you saw, the left put out a picture of him praying with his eyes closed, saying that he was falling asleep during the RNC convention,
Ah,
which that
classic.
was absolutely absurd. I
They
mean,
said it about Reagan too.
yeah,
Oh, he sleeps through all of his cabinet meetings. And when
yeah,
he's
and he
not
was
sleeping,
praying. He was
yeah,
actually praying.
classic.
And the other thing too, I mean, this is obviously the tone of our conversation is more serious and doesn't require this commentary, but just to throw it in there because I mean, it's this the obvious thing to just note is that Trump gets shot, then 48 hours later is giving a speech that went past midnight.
Yeah,
And he's been at this
amazing.
convention for days. He's been up at it, working for the American people. Meanwhile, I mean, we know Biden was in bed, but he also tweeted that he was sick, and there's talks about him stepping down. And they've
COVID.
already said that he's not at his best after 8 p.m. or whatever it is. All sorts of things. So, I mean, if you want to contrast too, looking at the age thing, I mean,
Yeah,
Trump clearly is sharp, on top of it and has the energy. I mean, he's just been plowing through all of this
He's a
despite,
force of nature, isn't he? I
despite all
mean,
the circumstances. He's sharper than me, sharper than it's actually amazing.
yeah, I fell asleep during his speech, right? I
Oh, so
mean,
that, yeah, I was like, I was thinking to myself, so this was funny. Someone tweeted out the Trump speech July 18th to July 19th, 2024, which was funny. And this was, they were joking and saying, oh, but I was just thinking to myself, I want to keep joking about this, how long it is, and I wanted to complain in a sense because I go to bed early so that I can get up
yeah, I
for
do too.
sunrise in the morning. But I just thought, I cannot I can't even think any sort of complaint about how late it is right now because thank God he's alive. Thank God he's here. Thank God we have the privilege of hearing him speak right now with what just happened. Because I'm laying in my bed, like tweeting, working, watching the speech, making sure I'm on top of it. And it was a great speech. I'm glad I watched it. But I was also thinking, this is a little past my bedtime. I wish it was over earlier. But then I just thought, I cannot complain about this because I mean, it could be a much different night.
Yeah, and for the record, I think is the first 30 minutes of that speech were fantastic. I mean, it was so good. And I said to another of my sons that I was watching it with, because I'm here in Old Town Alexandria at the American Spectator's offices, and so my family was down here with me. I stayed at a hotel last night. We went out to dinner with Bob Terrell and his wife the night before, so it was kind of a long night, and I was tired. But the first 30 minutes was really riveting. And I said to my son, I said, he should stop right here. I know he probably is going to want to make a whole bunch of policy points about drilling for oil and everything, but he should just say something right now like, there's a lot more I'd like to say to you all, but it's been a crazy week, and just thank you all, and just walk off the stage, right? But instead, he went on for a long time. I think he went on for too long. But that aside, the fact that he had that energy and stamina to do that, he's not much younger than Biden, right? I mean, there's not a big age difference between these two guys. He just has so much energy; it's incredible.
Yeah,
I don't know where the guy gets it. He's
I don't.
really a force of nature, a freak of nature.
Well, and again, I think that the Lord has to be giving him strength because where else do you get that? I
Right,
mean,
right.
to this at least, even though it was long, it does show for voters checking off, oh, I'm concerned about age, this and that. You do see the complete contrast here between
Yeah,
it is two opposites where it at least shows that okay, Trump is someone that I would trust if in the middle of the night Iran's like, oh, we're gonna whatever. Like that's someone I would trust to be able to handle things in the Oval Office, which is what you need to be able to do if you're in that position. No one trusts Biden to be able to handle anything that's going on. And even his own team has made comments about how he's not very good at night because he can't handle
yeah.
it. So
And
this,
you can't have that. Yeah.
yeah,
Trump probably has twice the energy level of JD Vance, right? Now, nothing against JD Vance. But and also too, I mean, Trump did not get credit from the left for what he did during COVID. You could not have had a more hands-on manager. In fact, if you recall, the left was complaining that he was holding daily press conferences about COVID and vaccines. So you can't make them happy ever. And in fact, through Operation Warp Speed, Trump gave the left the experimental mRNA vaccines that they wanted so badly. They had to build a monument to Trump for giving them their sacred clot shots that they tried to force everybody in America to be mandated to take, right? But instead, this is Trump's vaccine. I'm not going to take it. Then as soon as Biden comes in, well, now it's Biden's vaccine. I'm taking it and you better take it too. Now I'm going to force you to take it. But the stamina and the
except
energy
for
that he
Biden,
showed
he
through
took
COVID,
probably 100 boosters, and look at him right now.
right, and he got COVID again. Yeah, exactly. Right. Where's people like you know, Travis Kelsey, Mr. Pfizer to come out right now and give another boost for Pfizer's latest booster shot. Yeah, yeah. So Biden got COVID again? How? He's not supposed to get COVID. He's been vaxxed already, right? Well, he's not having bad had symptoms because he's been
What drives me
vaccinated.
crazy though, it's that exists, that hypocrisy exists, right? So the left can say for years and years and years, you have to get the vax, you're killing your neighbors if you don't get the vax, you're evil, you're
You're
horrible.
not loving your neighbor, our
Yes,
religious left
saying
friends.
all sorts of things like that. You have to be up on your boosters. We're not going to let you go to restaurants or church if you don't get the vax and wear a mask. And then this happens where, yeah, actually, Joe Biden just proved, as if there wasn't enough proof, that that was all political and ridiculous because Biden, who's gotten all of the boosters, right, and who has made everyone else get a bunch of boosters, gets COVID anyways.
Yeah.
But people don't even comment on that. It's just like, oh,
They made it a religious crusade, right?
why does
What
that
would
not
Jesus
cancel
do? Well,
something?
Jesus would come up to you and stick that needle in your arm and make you take it right.
Pretty much.
Um,
Yeah, that is what that's what the attitude was.
I just reviewed Megan Basham's book, Shepherds for Sale. I reviewed it for Claremont Review of Books, and I'm not sure when it'll be out, but I sent it in, and her best chapter is on the kind of COVID sellout by major religious leaders. But anyway, we're getting a little bit off topic, but to tie this back to Reagan and Trump, maybe this is just a good spot to wrap this up. Remember that line from Reagan, right? Whatever time I have left is for him, capital H, right? Whatever time I have left is for God. Now, I don't know if Trump is at that point, but a brush with death will change a man.
Mhm.
And he looked like a different person throughout that convention. I must say, by the end of that speech on Thursday, he looked kind of like this same old Trump. But the beginning of the speech, he was very different. I think he's changed, but I think it's going to change him, ironically, for the better. But how much we'll have to wait and see.
Well, and I think too, just from this as Christians, I mean, we should always be praying that just that the Lord would speak to Trump, Biden, everyone,
Right, right. That's exactly right.
that all of the people who are leading us, that their hearts would be softened towards the Lord and that they'd seek the Lord and follow his guidance. So that's always a prayer we should be praying for everyone, and especially at a time like this. But also, I think from what Reagan said, there's a lesson for all of us, and from what just happened to Trump. I mean, even though these are really extreme marches, like very close to death that they just had, I mean, all of us, we're not promised another day ever. And that's something I learned when I was in high school. I had a friend pass away, and that taught me that really like jump scared me into, oh my gosh, like we really aren't guaranteed our next day. So we should all just be reminded at this time that every day is a gift from God. And
Right.
we should already be at that point where we're going to live for him, and everything else that we can do in our lives should be for him. That should be the point that we're just in default at as Christians. And even though it is, sometimes we need to just recenter on it and be reminded of that, okay, like, what am I living for? Is it for God? And how can I seek the Lord more? Because it's true, we never know when our last day will be.
Yeah, yeah. So the attitude of gratitude, right? Should be grateful all the time for what you have. And that might be a good way to close this, right? Those words from Reagan. Whatever time I have left is for him. That's how we should all look at it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure that you share this with your friends, like and subscribe. Go to spectator.org for more, and make sure to check out the articles that we talked about through this video. So the one in Crisis Magazine and also the American Spectator. And we just look forward to seeing you next week. We always enjoy having these conversations, and we hope that you do too.
Sure do. See you guys. See you next week.